Well, good morning, y'all. So I'm still working on this Kenworth, and as you can see, I finally got the motor in. Well, me and a friend of mine got this big bitch in. You can see I kind of have this bizarre contraption up front, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about this here. So we appropriately named this the bullshit tool. You can see that it hooks onto the crank pulley, comes up, then you got a couple pieces of angle up top here that I'll explain what they do here in a little bit. But if you notice, it is just above the valve cover. So what we had to do is, because this motor and transmission combo, the transmission is literally supported by the engine. The transmission has no mounts on it, nothing like that. So we had to pull the motor and put it with as an assembly, which is good and bad. Bad is it means more weight that you got to try to heave in and out of the vehicle, and you have a problem with it being extremely tail heavy, and that's where this is into play here. So I used my skid steer here. As you can see, I put forks all the way together, and I took a chain, wrapped around the end here, and I wrapped the chain through the two supports on the top of this PACCAR 6.7. Well, when you do that, this motor becomes extremely tail heavy, and that means that the front of the motor is going to be hanging way higher than the back, and the back is going to be way lower than it. So what happens is, because of the configuration of the cab of this truck, you cannot set the motor on the motor mounts that way. You won't clear the firewall or any of the wiring, air lines. You got your grid heater control valve. You won't clear any of that with the forks of the skid steer. And in severe cases, you have to worry about the air dam and the actual windshield, which were things that we ran into yesterday. So what you do, or what we did, I should say, is we connected the chain to the back of to the lift points on the motor, ran the chain around the very tip of the forks here. Then we ran a safety chain from this chain all the way back and around the mast for the forks, and we got it as close as we can get it to the valve cover, with giving us a little bit of play so we don't break anything, shatter valve cover, anything of that nature. Well, then your forks will actually sit on here, and once you get the motor in, you can roll your forks back, and the forks actually push down on that tool, pushing down on your main crank, and that would actually lift the back of the motor up, causing it to become as flat as you need it to, as tail high or as far tail down as you need it to shoehorn it into this truck. When you look at the motor outside the truck, you're like, Jesus, that's a large motor. And you look at this gaping cavity that was in the truck, you think there's no problem getting that in there. Well, we had all kinds of issues clearing starter, frame mounts back here on the back of the motor itself. And that goes for both sides. On the driver's side of this truck, you have all of your wiring over here. You have your ECM. On this motor and truck, you have your air compressor under here, high pressure fuel pump back in there, fuel filter here. Those were all things that got in our way when we were trying to get this motor in. Not to mention, you have your heater box for the cab of the truck, you have your washer box, radiator, surge bottle or surge tank, etc. That's not even to mention oil pan, transmission pan, etc. So basically, we just, what we named the bullshit tool by the end of the day yesterday, because we're sick of the bullshit on this motor. We had quite the problem yesterday. Bolts breaking, bolts not fitting where they came out of, seals not included with the gasket set on this motor. It was quite the cluster yesterday. So it was an ordeal by the end of the day yesterday. My buddy and I were quite tired of working on this. So we currently just have some air compressor lines, some wiring, transmission needs to be hooked back up. And then there's some other parts that I'm waiting on. I can't get till tomorrow midday, tomorrow afternoon, which would be all your fuel lines, high pressure fuel line, fuel return lines, all that stuff. Being on this truck for 400,000+ miles, they were so dry rotted that they were breaking. And I got another example right here. So this is actually a coolant line for part of the coolant system on this motor, and it has these nifty little push and lock fittings on here. Well, this hose isn't really a hose, it's hard plastic, and so are these connectors. Well, as you can see, this isn't cracked. There's no signs of wear on it. There's no issues whatsoever. As soon as I went to go push this side on, it cracked and broke right off the fitting. So that's the kind of things that we were dealing with all day yesterday. So that's where I'm at with the truck right now. And just wanted to give you a little insight to when you need a tool and you have the ability, make a tool. Necessity is the mother of invention. And I've made probably over 100 custom-made tools for things that I need that I either didn't have the money to buy, or I couldn't find someone who made a tool for that particular situation. So just a little kind of things that I do out here. This is just kind of a overview of what we did here. I'll explain a little bit more about this. This is all metal I had just laying around in the shop. I took a section of this pipe right here, cut it off the end, split it down the middle, measured all my angles and everything so it would sit on the crank pulley just right. With this assembly hung on the crank pulley, I took the tape measure, measured from the top of this bar, measured 1 inch above the oil cap here. I knew that was going to allow me to keep the forks low enough to the valve cover that I can get it in and bypass all the stuff on the firewall, and it would keep me high enough where if something shifted, I wouldn't smack into your valve cover, your PCV filter cover, and all that stuff up here. So after I did that, I cut this bar right here, and just like I said, more pieces I had laying around my shop. I just put a piece of angle on here, measured the width of the forks, went 1 inch wider between here, so I had play. And that was something else I want to mention. This inside diameter is 2 inches. The crank pulley, where the harmonic balancer is actually attached to the crank pulley, is actually 1 3/4 inches. And I wanted to make sure I had some play, so if this tool sat up here, and I wanted to make sure that I had play forward and back, so if something shifted, it wasn't going to be bending and breaking into the harmonic balancer there. So this is just kind of the stuff that I do. And my buddy says he has 2 more trucks that need motors. I don't know if I'm going to take them on. So we'll see what happens in the future. And so that's where we're at today. And this is 2 days after the last video I uploaded. So just to show you kind of how long it takes, even with skid steer. And I mean, I got some pretty big ass tools, so it's not fun, but at the end of the day you do feel accomplished. So that's just kind of where I'm at with the truck, and I'll post another video on where I'm at and progress, maybe later today or maybe tomorrow, and I'll post the video of when we try to start this thing.